stereotypes about us are. And so one thing that happens is that we have books like Skinny Bitch, and we have the two female authors who don't look like, pasty faced bastards, right? They're looking beautiful in this kind of socially acceptable way of beauty, and trying to represent that I'm not what you think I am, and I can be a vegan and look this way. A poster like this doesn't make sense without the idea of the burden of representation. So Alicia Silverstone is there, displaying her body and saying, I'm vegetarian, it's not what you think. But you wouldn't be able to do that if you didn't know what someone else was thinking, right? It's not just women, men. How many of you have seen all the male bodybuilders who are getting lots of attention, flexing their muscles? And I see on Facebook all the time, someone's bench pressing this much weight to show that because veganism is associated with femininity and not masculinity, and masculinity is associated with strength. So vegan men have to show just how strong they are. So all of these, to me, are signs of some oppression. This constant need to deny, the stereotype. Another thing that I find really cool is that to look how oppressors have handled these burdens over time. I do see an evolution that's taken place. So if you look at some of the early black leaders, basically 100 years ago, Du Bois and also Marcus Garvey, they recognize that they are seen as representatives. But they say, you know what? If we have to represent, let's represent well. Let's work together and uplift the Negro race. Let's, by our own energy and effort and energy, present to the world, the best of what a man can be. So the early leaders, I would say, felt maybe held trapped by this oppression. This has changed, however. So if you look at someone like Michael Eric Dyson, born in the middle of the 20th century, a black scholar, he admits that, and when the time that he was born, talking about himself here, he was given a black card that made you a member of a group, and you had to give to the group and be a good productive member and do everything. But he's now, as an adult, as he's lived his life, he talks about sort of bristling under that. He no longer is happy about having to represent. And these quotes come from Thérèse's book, Who's Afraid of Post-Blackness. If you haven't read it, it's a phenomenal book. And he clearly is representing a new way or a new rejection of the burden of representation. And he says, I love his quote here, he admits that he grew up in the 70s. He also got that same sense, but his hope is, I want to get to a place where we don't make decisions based on the white gaze. That's that double consciousness. It's a heavy, invisible chain to lug around. And then he says, I refuse to curtail my life because of fear of the white gaze. I'm going to do what I want to do, damn it. And he actually says in the book, his example is not, I don't like it. He says, therefore, if I want to eat fried chicken in front of whites, I'm going to eat it. I'm going to eat it, but that's a whole other story. But this is contrasted with, okay, there is a carnist gaze out there, but how do we as vegans handle it? And I'm going to suggest that current vegan leaders, and I say Carol J. Adams and Melanie Joy, I include them as this, their solution, suggestion, sounds a lot more like what the black leaders were saying 100 years ago. So Carol Adams says, we really have to be careful about how we are around non-vegans. Her first quote is basically saying we need to be experts in body language. So when we speak to a non-vegan, how is their chin? How are their shoulders? We need to read them to know how to deal with them. Really? We do? She admits, I'm asking vegetarians to exhibit a moral, emotional, and spiritual maturity that's quite demanding. So she admits this is a hardship. She doesn't say it's easy. But it sounds very much like I could see Marcus Garvey saying, I'm asking Negroes 100 years ago to exhibit this moral, emotional courage to do this. Kind of interesting. Melanie Joy also says that, vegans have to be empathic with non-vegans. And she thinks we need to learn principles of nonviolent communication in order that the burden is on us to know how to communicate with non-vegans. So I think I find it curious. Thinking of this idea of black skin, white masks, I'm thinking about what masks vegans might wear. where do we cover up our veganism or try to hide it somehow? Both Joy and Adams talk about not letting non-vegans know when you're sick. Has anyone ever done this? If you have a cold, you don't want to let people know because they're going to say, oh, you're vegan, because I'm definitely going to get cold. I'm going to skip this and go quickly. This is personally interesting to me because a year ago, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And I think if I had been diagnosed, say, 8 years ago, before I was a vegan, I would have just been like this. I hope I'll live, cancer, death. But instead, my attitude was a little bit more like this. And this is true. I really thought, oh crap, I'm going to make veganism look bad. The diagnosis came at a time when I was becoming much more active in my veganism. I had started a meetup group for vegans. I'm proposing a class of intro to veganism at my college, and suddenly, can I do that? How can I teach it? I have cancer. So I had this attitude for several months. I feel now, so I don't think it's really. But clearly, to me, that's oppression. That's some form of oppression telling me that I have to represent properly. Okay, so scooching on really quickly. Other concepts that possibly could apply. The weight of pedagogy. I love this term. I get it from Mimi Thi Nguyen. She's a Vietnamese American who writes a lot about riot girl movements of the 1990s, and she quotes Beyonce Ortiz. And what is the weight of pedagogy? It's the weight says that, well, the dominant culture doesn't know much about my culture. So whose responsibility is it to teach them about it? It's mine. And I've got to go around teaching. And I think many of us who are vegans probably have spent a lot of time teaching others and having all the answers of everything from global warming to, stuff. But what's interesting to me is when I look around at these other groups, they recognize there is a weight of pedagogy, but they are rejecting it. And I love, she quotes Beyonce Ortiz, who was one of those riot girls, who says, I'm sick of being the example to teachers, et cetera, et cetera. So she's sick of it. I have a quote from Hartar Singh Bal. He's a Sikh American. He wrote this it's a great New York Times op-ed piece he wrote right after the bombing of the Sikh temple a few years ago. And afterwards, lots of Sikhs were coming on the news saying, we need to explain to the world more about our religion. We're really about peace. And he's basically saying, bullshit. I can understand why other Sikhs think we need to use this as a chance to teach about religion, but I think these efforts are absurd. And then finally, Ali Ederaz, who writes about hip-hop issues, this is a quote I found right after the unfortunate Don Imus fiasco, where he used very derogatory language to refer to the Rutgers women's basketball team. And afterwards, there were lots of older black leaders who were saying, well, we need to educate whites. They can't use this language. And he again said, no, blacks are not tasked with the job of teaching white people the limits of acceptable vernacular. In short, blacks don't need to teach whites better. Whites need to teach whites better. And so I wonder why we as vegans, I see we're kind of behind the times, I don't know. But it seems like we do take on these burdens. The last concept I want to talk about is microaggressions. This is a well-known concept. It's the way it's all the small little things, whether verbal, nonverbal, or environmental, that face you. They're not huge, structural problems, but for the vegan, it might be your friend who just always forgets that you don't take food in your coffee, or your coworker who you open your lunch at work and they kind of give you this face like, what is this you're eating? And you see, I've got a few of these bumper stickers and things like that. And the idea here is that we do face these aggressions. It's whether just the environment of seeing so many advertisements for meat everywhere, all kinds of things, and how do we respond? If we respond and call people on their carnism, we're being too sensitive. If we don't, then we just have to suffer in silence and just stop our feelings. And the last little thing here is this idea of rescuing offenders. It's a very interesting phenomenon where if someone does offend us, someone